Welcome back to Dead by Daylight Should You Main series. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the Blight. I'm going to go over everything you need to know about him. I'm going to go over strength, fun, skill ceiling, perk synergies, MAPRELIANCE, all that good stuff. And at the end, if you haven't already decided, you can sort of decide if you want to play or even main the Blight. The Blight's power is called Blighted Corruption. It's quite a simple power, and I'll just briefly explain it. So you start with 5 rush tokens. When you press the ability button, you will enter a rush. During this rush, you can't attack. You move at twice the base movement speed and have a turn rate of 60 degrees per second. Although you do have a sort of look angle where you can look a certain way but not actually move there. And that will come up later in terms of flicks. It's very important. We all know how it goes from there. You slam into an object, it allows you to do another rush, which is a lethal rush. You can attack out of that. And then so on and so on until you run out of rushes, attack someone, or just enter a fatigue. Very simple power, but very complex at the same time. I don't usually do this for these videos, but I want to go over the intricacies of Blight's power, because there's a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to sort of rhyme off a few things off the top of my head, which you might want to know about Blight. So everyone knows about hug techs. It's when you basically face hug an object, you look down, which gives you the prompt to rush. And since you're already so close to the object, you won't actually collide with it, as you can see in this video clip is what I'm about to do. We'll just wait for it here. Watch how I go up close to it, look down, and then I lose collision. I can't collide with it because I'm technically not running into it. I'm already touching it, so I can't really collide with it. This is sort of inconsistent though. Sometimes it won't let you rush, sometimes you'll just bump into it anyway. Since it's not necessarily intended, obviously, it's not going to be consistent. But it usually is somewhat consistent and can be useful. Although I wouldn't rely on it too much, especially because a lot of survivors look out for it and sort of know what you're doing. In terms of flicks, it's actually quite simple. What you want to do is look to where you're going to flick, which is called a pre-turn. I talked about the look angle earlier. So what you want to do, we can actually see in this once I hug tag all around Shack. Notice I'm sort of looking where I'm going to flick, and then I actually flick into it. Without adrenaline vial or anything else, you can sort of look not 90 degrees to your side, more about 45. It's not an entire 90. And then the flick itself is also a bit more, but when you sort of combine the two plus the momentum shift, it turns into somewhat of a 180, although it's not a very tight one. Other things to look out for is bad collision. I'll go over later in terms of MAPRELIANCE, what maps are bad for this, but for a general rule of thumb, if the object you're trying to bump into is below your knees, you're most likely going to slide on it. This is the case for a lot of rocks. Say on Macmillan there's a rock, and the bottom of it sort of sticks out a bit, that's probably going to make you slide on it. So just look out for these wee things, but like I said, we'll go into it a bit deeper later. The next thing I want to talk about is bump logic. Bump logic is literally just using your bounces correctly, using your slams, using all your rushes. Once again, this sort of varies from situation to situation. In general, you want to try and confirm it. Having good bump logic is the most important thing you can have a Blight do, because it's the most consistent form of winning. Going for flicks and all is cool, and it's what a lot of people will say, is really strong about Blight. But at the end of the day, it is the bump logic which separates the good Blights from the bad Blights, not the flicks. Because flicks are risky. Flicks don't always work and sort of rely on you predicting what the survivor's going to do. Whereas good bump logic is uncounterable. If you put yourself in a position where you're right in front of the survivor, or have a good line of sight on them, through your bump logic, you'll hit them. But if you just try to rely on flicks and stuff all the time, you're going to find that your matches are very inconsistent, because some matches you're going to be landing all these flicks, and some matches you're going to get unlucky and you're not going to land any of them. So how strong is the Blight? Currently, as of making this video, Blight is basically undoubtedly the second best killer in the game. He is so good at basically everything. He's got a really good chase, provided you're a good Blight and the situation calls for it, which is most of the time. He's got the best mobility in the game. He's got the best catch-up in the game. Basically, no matter what, Blight has an answer for it. Really good against immersed survivors because they don't have much time to hide upon hearing your terror radius. Very good against survivors who are good at looping, because a good Blight can sort of counter that. Very good against people who try to split gens and shit because you can drop chases so easily and get to gens. Just, good against survivors who hold W because, well, there's nothing they can do if you just immediately start moving at twice the movement speed with zero charge up or anything like that. So Blight is just so strong. That's not to say he has no weaknesses. Once again, good loops can still just counter Blight. Strong loops, strong buildings, stuff like that. Bad collision can really screw him over in some maps. Indoor maps, once again, also screw him over. Just other stuff like that. Just splitting on gens. Still counters Blight technically. Just counters every killer. He's still limited. He's not like Nurse, where he just ignores loops. That being said, a good Blight who's playing, on their A game, they're landing every hit, they're not messing up, will absolutely shit on the majority of survivors pretty fast. So how fun is the Blight? In my opinion, one of the most fun killers in the game, if not the most fun killer in the game. Sort of why I mentioned how he's strong is one of the reasons why he's fun. He's a very strong killer, meaning you're just not going to get shit on as easy as you would with most other killers. But also, what makes Blight strong is also very fun for the killer. Counters holding W, counters gen rushing, counters a lot of loops, stuff like that. It's just fun for the killer because if you have an answer for basically everything, it's not going to be that unfun for you. Unlike, a killer like Clown, who's just not going to have much fun if people just keep holding W against him. So overall, I would say Blight is definitely, subjectively, one of the most fun killers in the game. Next is going to be skill ceiling. It's pretty commonly known that Blight has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game. His skill floor, honestly, Blight isn't all that hard to pick up. Unlike Nurse, who's a very high learning curve, Blight, you can pick him up pretty fast, but mastering the Blight and getting good at everything takes a very long time and a lot of skill, which makes it very satisfying to play, and another reason why you should main him. Good Blights, great Blights, beginner Blights, very easily distinguishable. It's very easy to tell who's been playing Blight for a long time and who hasn't, which is one of the great things about him. There's a lot to learn. Collision, flicks, bump logic, everything. Nothing, every game you're learning is Blight. You're just continuously getting better with every game you play, which is just so good, and every killer should be like that. Next is PERK synergies. So Blight is notorious for having pretty unoriginal perks between each player. The usual Ruin, Undying, Tinker, Pop, usual shit like that. But I also want to go a wee bit more in depth here. So obviously for perks you don't want to run, that's going to be stuff that requires a basic attack. The majority of hits you're going to be landed with Blight are going to be through your lethal rush, which isn't a basic attack. So you don't want to use perks like Sloppy Butcher, Haunted Grounds, Make Your Choice, Devour Hope, stuff like that, which requires a basic attack, because you're not going to be getting much value out of them. Perks you do want to use are perks that are going to be capitalizing on your mobility and your ability to pressure gens. So that's going to be, obviously, like I mentioned, Pop, Ruin and Dying, Tinker, stuff like that. What other slowdown perks really can use? You can't really use Surge or anything like that, so honestly, you can't even really blame Blights for using these perks because there's not really many other good slowdown perks. Other than that, Pain Resonance and Dead Man Switch work well on them, and just basically every tracking perk. So Barbecue, Discordance, Thrill and Tremors, Bitter Murmur, all that stuff works very well on Blight, and that's generally what you want to use. Your Blight builds should consist of just a good balance between gen slowdown and tracking perks. Generally, what you want to do with your killer perks are cover for your killer's weaknesses. In Blight's case, that's going to just be tracking and, overall just slowing down the gens. I don't recommend running chase perks like Endurance, Spirit Fury, Brutal Strength. I wouldn't bother using any of those perks. Like I said, just stick to tracking and gen slowdown. One of my guilty pleasures is Shadowborn. I only use that on Blight. I just like it, to be honest. I find that the extra field of view is really nice for landing hits on survivors. It lets you see a wee bit more, and makes you go a bit faster. It just feels really nice. It's basically a wasted perk slot. I suggest you don't get hooked on Shadowborn like I did, but hopefully one day the devs will just give over and give killers an FOV slider so that we can just have an extra 15 degrees. It's not going to do anything to the balance. It's just going to make playing killer feel a lot nicer. Now let's look at some meme builds for the Blight. The two most notable ones I can think of are what I call Myers Blight and Skill Checks Blight. Myers Blight, you might think is Scratchmire Blight, where you run Vigo's Journal and Compound 21, so you basically turn into Scratchmire's Blight, technically. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is Vigo's Journal and Iridescent Blight Tag. Now, this is sort of Myers because you get the undetectable status effect from the Vigo's Journal, but you also have the ability to insta-down with the Iridescent Blight Tag. And when you combine these, it actually becomes pretty damn scary because, I mean, think about it. Let's say you know someone's in the gen, right? You know, for this me build, you're probably going to want to run a lot of tracking perks. Let's say you have Discordance and it pops in a gen. What's stopping you from going near the gen, using your rush to become undetectable, getting on your last rush, and then running at the generator? The survivors are only going to probably see you when you're close by. They're not going to be able to react to you that much, and you're most likely going to get an insta-done. It's a really fun build. It's not terribly effective. It only works in some maps, in some situations, and most survivors sort of look out for it. They can't counter it, but it's definitely pretty fun and actually strong enough, especially if the survivors aren't very vigilant. Skill checks Blight is basically just your average skill checks build. So, Unnerving Presence, Hunter's Lullaby, stuff like that, Undying. But you also use the Soul Chemical add-on, which creates a skill check when you bounce within a survivor's range. This one really only works against bad survivors, but it is pretty hilarious to use because people just feel skill checks all over the place. I had a game with this where people didn't get one gen done because they were just feeling so many skill checks. It was pretty hilarious. But I would not use that build for effectiveness because it will not work against good survivors because they just will not miss the skill checks. And lastly, we have MAPRELIANCE. Now, unfortunately for Blight, he is by far the most MAPRELIANCE killer in this game. He's sort of like Hellbilly and Arsenal, where indoor maps are not good for him. So, you got RPD, you've got Larry's, you've got the game. You used to have Hawkins, but not anymore. But Blight also has the curse of bad collision maps, and there is a lot of them. I'm just going to rhyme a few off the top of my head here, which have really shit collision. Swamp, notoriously, Grim Pantry and Pale Rose have terrible collision for Blight and are horrible maps for him. Temple of Purgation and Red Forest also have really bad collision, although I'd say Red Forest is worse. Shelter Woods also has very bad collision. A lot of the Cold Wind maps, very bad collision. Ormond, bad collision. There's some other ones. Yamaoka, terrible collision, one of his worst maps as well. There are just so many bad collision maps for Blight. It's insane. And you just got generally bad killer maps, like, Haddonfield, Badham, stuff like that, Fractured Cowshed, are also just very bad for Blight. So, in terms of MAPRELIANCE, by far, it can make or break an experience. Blight becomes a D-tier killer on some maps, which is unfortunate. And you sort of feel the need to run map offerings basically every game when you play this killer because he's so fun on Macmillan and All Haven and stuff. But when you don't bring map offerings, it just seems that you load into Larry's, and then you get Swamp, and then you get Yamaoka, and then you get RPD, and you're just having no fun at all because your power barely functions on any of these maps. Although he does have some good ones, like I said, Macmillan, All Haven, and even Midwich is specifically good for Blight. But overall, the majority of the maps seem to be really shit for him, which is a shame. And they really do ruin the experience. So if you're going to learn Blight and play him, I recommend you just stock up on the map offerings which favour him because it really does make or break the killer. So that's all for this video. Overall, I would say that you should main Blight. He's definitely probably the most mainable killer in the game. I mean, he's just so rewarding, so fun, so strong. What's not to love about main Blight? I would be careful though when it comes to stuff like add-ons because you can become quite reliant on them. People have their own addictions with Blight, ironically enough. A lot of people get addicted to running speed add-ons, a lot of people get addicted to running Compound 21, Compound 33, Alchemist Ring, Adrenaline Vial, stuff like that. So I would watch out and try and keep a good add-on variety when playing this killer. You don't want that to become stale. Next episode of this, I'm not sure who it will be. Maybe Oni, or even the new killer, which is the Sadaku, the ring killer. So that's all for this one. Thanks for watching.